that's just my luck. Hey, what can I say? I'm just lucky that way.
Geology! Geology! And Geology, this is Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist from KPFT, Houston. This is HD2 channel. Welcome to the Mini Geology Show, where we put in connection every week our beloved discipline of geology with society at large. So, I was wondering, how do we spread the passion of geology? How do we inoculate the virus of curiosity in some to be geologists? How do we do it? Well, I think that personally, I would do it very simple, by taking those people to the outcrops. But we'll see if that's the right way to do it. Today, we'll answer these questions following closely the activities of the program GeoForce, an outreach program designed to increase the number and diversity of students pursuing careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but especially in geology. So GeoForce has been so successful that President Obama awarded the people of GeoForce for excellence in science, mathematics, and engineering mentoring. And connected from Austin, Texas, we have our guests today. Dana Thomas. She is the Outreach Program Coordinator for GeoForce at the Jackson School of Geosciences in UT Austin. And then we have also two alumni, Daniel and Thomas. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Okay, we have a full room in here, even though we are a couple of hours away from Austin, capital of Texas, to Houston, the hub of energy. How do you feel over there?
I'm feeling good. It's been a good day.
Feeling good. So, Dana, I would start asking you, what is GeoForce and what is the purpose of this program?
So GeoForce was started after alumni of the Jackson School of Geosciences and companies in Houston, energy companies in Houston, really saw that the community of geoscientists kind of across the country really doesn't reflect the demographics of our country and of Texas. So they got together a plan to put a program in place that would encourage and really expose students from rural communities in Southwest Texas and inner city areas in Houston to geology and to the geosciences. So what we do is we take high school students on week-long field experiences to places that we hope are kind of awe-inspiring and really neat places that they might never get to go.
So you bring them to the field.
We do. We bring them to the field. Yeah. And we can hear from these alumni who are with us what that was like. A lot of students who come on these trips with us have never been outside their hometown. They've maybe never gone on an airplane before. And we try to give them exciting experiences, but at the same time show them that you can really have a career in the geosciences.
So, Dana, you mentioned demographics.
Yes.
Why do you think it was so important to solve this problem of studying the demographics and understanding that the workforce related to geology did not really represent the demographics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as a field, the geosciences kind of broadly across the U.S. has been struggling with this challenge of a lack of diversity, both in our students and in the professional world, the professional workforce. We are unfortunately the least diverse of STEM fields, and there are a lot of ideas as to why that is. But what GeoForce hopes to do is by recruiting and by recruiting diverse students from Texas, from around Texas, then we're exposing a whole new generation, younger generation of learners to a whole field that they may never have thought about as a career or as even just something to study.
You mentioned rural areas in inner cities.
Mm-hmm.
And you also said that there are some theories about that. Can you talk about that? Well, what is the problem of having people from those parts of Texas?
Well, if you're kind of thinking about how does someone get into geology, so there's a number of different ways someone might become interested in it. For myself, for example, I took it as a class in college. I didn't even really know about geology until I took it at LSU, where I went to school. And for that, we often call it a discovery major. So it might not be until someone's first or second year in college where they take an intro to geology class and really enjoy it and start studying it. A lot of times the way people fall into geology is through maybe family or friends who are geologists. And so if we don't get, new kind of people coming into the geology field, then we'll only be making more of ourselves, if you kind of know what I mean. So there are other ideas, kind of, maybe it's not so clear what you can do with a geology degree. What jobs can you have? It's very easy to think about, I know I can be a doctor. I know I can become a doctor, or I know what it means to be an engineer. And we really want people to be excited about the possibility of, I want to be a geoscientist.
Dan, do you think that the reason why we want people in these areas underrepresented, we want them to involve them into the workforce, is to bring new ideas?
For sure.
Different perspectives? Is that the reason why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's also, earth science affects everyone. It really affects all of us in our daily lives. And I think it's only right if we have people from all parts of our communities involved in the earth sciences. I mean, if we're going to be making decisions about where to get our water from and where that water goes to certain communities or how we get our energy, those decisions affect everyone, no matter your race, your socioeconomic status, your gender. And so all people should have a voice in those decisions. And I think earth science, geology, geoscience, and all its related fields really allow people to do that.
I'm glad that you're talking about that, because we also here at Mini Geology, what we try to do is to give a voice to the voiceless once we create an audience through the other more famous geologists that they already have an audience. So we create an audience in here, and I would like to introduce now Daniel and Thomas, that they are students of the GeoForce. I would call them alumni. And actually, I would ask you, Daniel or Thomas, you decide who goes first. Let's double-check what Dana said. Is that all true? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with just about everything Dana said.
So you're Daniel or Thomas?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. This is one of the first experiences I've ever had out of my home state of actually going out into a completely different state. I honestly had very rare experiences of that in high school.
So tell us about you. Did you live in the rural areas or inner cities?
No, I'm from Houston. I'm from Lindale Park. It's a little neighborhood in the north side.
Okay, and Daniel or Thomas, I don't know who's who.
So that was Thomas speaking. Daniel, I am from a rural town. I'm from Uvalde, Texas, which is west of San Antonio. Got a population of about 20,000 people, and it's the biggest city in the region.
And you have some mines there, don't you? Some volcanics.
There's some, yeah. There's a trap rock mine about 10 miles outside of Uvalde.
I see. I often pass by when I go to see the outcrops in southwest Texas in Del Rio, so I think I go and I stop in Uvalde sometimes. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you coming from Uvalde, Daniel, do you think at some point when you are with your peers from the city that you bring new ideas, you have a different perspective from them? Are you aware of it?
I think so, yeah, and I would say that perspective has come from traveling, and so GeoForce has exposed me to all different parts of the country, able to see both coasts and just to see different ways of life. And so, yeah, I'd have to agree that my perspective is broadened as a result, and maybe more so than someone who stayed in the small town and kind of has more of a narrow scope of ways of life.
What about you, Thomas? What is your perception when you are with your peers that they don't belong to these demographic areas underrepresented? Do you think that you have different ideas than them?
I guess it's very similar to what Dan was saying in the terms of, like, I've been exposed to a lot of outcrops and a lot of field sites in terms of going into these different places that we go to with GeoForce. And so I've been able to see all the different kinds of geology around the U.S. So, yeah, and I definitely feel like my perspective is a bit different because of those experiences.
Dana, can you tell us something more about the story behind GeoForce? Who launched it and when?
GeoForce started in 2005. That is when we first brought students into the field. I say we, even though I just joined the program a couple of years ago. But so that means that this last summer we had our 15th summer bringing high school students on field experiences. And it was homegrown within the Jackson School of Geosciences at UT Austin, has had a number of continued partners, mostly companies in the oil and gas industry. And we've had a couple of different leaders of the program, but right now Dean Sharon Mosier of the Jackson School is the big leader behind everything that we do, and she gives us the support to keep the program running, along with the important financial contributions that we get from our company sponsors.
Were you involved in the project since the very beginning?
No, I was not. I was still in my junior year of high school. I didn't know about geology yet.
So
no, I joined the staff of GeoForce almost 2 years ago, and it was such a joy to find that the program existed and that it was a good fit for my interests and my background.
Are there any similar programs to GeoForce that you know that you are aware of? Maybe not necessarily in Texas, but in the nation.
There really are not many. What is unique about GeoForce is that first we start engaging with students at a pretty young age. So students apply to be in GeoForce when they are in 8th grade. And the first summer that they come out with us is the summer after 8th grade. And they continue to come on 3 more trips, so 4 more trips total with us at no cost. So really the cohort building experience of 4 years is very unique to GeoForce. I was just at a national conference last week, the Geological Society of America, visiting with colleagues, seeing talks on similar initiatives to kind of attract traditionally underrepresented minorities or people who don't usually get into STEM, into the geosciences. And a lot of those programs are maybe for 1 week the summer between your junior and senior year of high school. So it's really unique that we have 4 years in a row with these students, and we really get to see them grow and and build friendships and become part of the GeoForce community.
So once you decide the students, they are always in the same group for 4 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
the students, how do you decide who are the ones that are gonna be part of this spectacular program? I think that once they know about this program, everybody would like to jump on board.
I know. We do wish we could have a GeoForce in every city, basically. So we recruit students by schools, in fact. So all of the schools that we recruit from in Houston are within HISD, and our criteria is that the school itself is more than 50% of the students are from economically disadvantaged homes, and more than 50% of the students at that school are minority, are non-white. So we kind of, by going to a diverse, disadvantaged community, then we are getting a mix of students from the populations that we're trying to reach. So the students in their application, they have to submit their grades, tell us what their grades are. We look for high performers in math and science. They are required to submit a letter of recommendation from a teacher. So our relationships with schools in HISD and then also in the Southwest Texas school districts we work with are really important for us to keep the program going. And the students also write an essay. So they tell us about why they want to be in GeoForce. Some of them talk about looking at just the natural world around them in their everyday lives, and you can see kind of these sparks of interest in STEM. Some of them talk about being in the robotics club at their middle school, and we select the students from that holistic criteria, looking at it holistically.
So, Dana, allow me to ask to Daniel and Thomas about the selection process. Can you tell us, Daniel, for instance, Daniel from Uvalde, can you tell us about that selection problems? How did you leave those days, and what did you write in the essay?
Okay, so you forced me to think a long ways back now. I applied in 2007, so I was part of the third GeoForce class. And, I was introduced by my 8th grade science teacher, someone who actually remained a part of the program for several years. Specifically what I wrote about, it's hard for me to recall, but I always had a passion, for the outdoors, for going out, going fishing with my dad, things like that. And then also I was really highly motivated academically, so I made good grades. And I was involved in lots of organizations, and so I probably included those kinds of things in my essay.
And did you think that you were going to be part of this GeoForce? Were you very positive when you took part in the selection process?
Yeah, I did. I felt confident when I submitted my application. I'm going to toot my own horn here and say that I graduated near the top of my class, and that's something that holds true for a lot of GeoForce students, especially in these small towns. Oftentimes, we'll recruit as 8th graders, and something like a quarter of the accepted students end up being either valedictorian or salutatorian of their high school class.
I bet. And where are you living now?
Can you say that again?
Are you living in Austin? Are you there, or you?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, I am. I'm living in Austin. I just started my graduate program here at UT in geology, and so I've lived here since 2011.
How many geologists do you have in Uvalde? Do you know any?
I know 0 geologists in Uvalde. Yeah.
Well, maybe that city is waiting for you.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, there are so many interesting formations and for sure minerals around that area. What about Thomas? What do you remember about the selection process in your essay?
Yeah, so the selection process, I remember being told about it in my 8th grade science class, but to be honest, I kind of forgot about it. And then my mom is actually a teacher. At the time, she taught elementary school, and so she had heard about this opportunity, and so she said, Thomas, like, you better apply to this because this is a wonderful opportunity to go across the U.S. and visit these wonderful places. And so I didn't take it seriously until I heard it from my mom. So after that, I applied, I sat down, I wrote the essay. I can't remember what I said, but definitely is a push from both the science teacher and my mom, the teacher.
And what is your position now? What are you doing now?
Right now I'm actually attending UT Austin. I'm majoring in geology, and I'm currently a senior. So definitely applying to internships and things like that, and thinking about grad school.
All right. So, Dana, what about the numbers of students that apply and students that they make it and they enter into the GeoForce program?
So we take about 84 students in every year. That's about half and half from the Houston area and from Southwest Texas. So a new crop of 42 from each area. And unfortunately, that's a lot lower than the number of students who do apply. So we usually are only able to take maybe about half or a third of the students who apply to be in GeoForce. But those 42 we hope that they stay with us for all 4 years. You never know when their real committed interest in geology might kind of set in. For some students, it's on that first trip when we go to the Texas Gulf Coast and talk about modern coastal processes. For some students, it's the third trip when we go to the Pacific Northwest and see active volcanoes.
And how many of those does the program retain? How many of those they remain engaged for the 4 years? All of them?
4 years. It's not quite all 100%. So by the time in their fourth year, sometimes students have developed other interests, and they may be in internships really now, or because we have these academically high-performing, ambitious students. A lot of times we end up competing for their time. But we have a really high retention rate. It's generally greater than 90%.
And the students that you choose, I remember you said that you go to some districts where you have 50% or more of minorities and 50% more of the economically disadvantaged students. But is there a possibility for you also to choose in those districts students that they don't belong to these two groups? Yes,
absolutely. So, there are white students, there are students who aren't maybe in poverty on these trips, and I think it actually makes for a really neat mix of students. We want people in the workforce to be able to work with all sorts of different people from different backgrounds and different perspectives, just like we've been talking about. So we don't select students individually by their race or ethnicity or gender, but based on the communities we're going into, our total demographics are about 80% of GeoForce students are minority, and a little more than 50% of the students are female as well.
Of course. What do you think about the gender issue? How's it going? How do you tackle this problem?
Yeah, well, that's something that the geosciences can actually be proud of in terms of gender. We've made a lot of strides over the last 20 years towards gender equity, where females, women are earning bachelor's degrees in geoscience at almost the same rate as males. That kind of tends to drop off after the bachelor's level. So it'll drop off from bachelor's to master's to PhD to faculty. But we really like that the gender balance of GeoForce represents what you see every day in everyday life.
And Dana, when you have all of this 84 eighth grade together, what does it happen? Do you have them all together when you go on a field trip, or do you have smaller groups?
Well, this is a great opportunity to let Daniel talk about these trips because he has now run a number of them.
Oh, Daniel is leading them now.
Yes. So I have to say, so we have at most 42 students on one trip, but that doesn't account for the staff. So in total, you have upwards of 55 people, an entire charter bus full of people attending these trips, and it can be really hectic. Things as simple as like finding a restroom or getting everybody fed can be difficult at times, but it's always a lot of fun.
Well, how are the interactions between these students? They are, at least they have in common the place of origin where they live. Their schools. They're in Texas. At least that's one thing. Is that enough to have them all getting along?
I think so. So they're all from the same region, but they're not all from the same high school. And I'm always interested to see how they interact because oftentimes the students that are accepted are not necessarily challenged by their peers in their own high school. And then when they go on these trips, they see other highly motivated students. And, it really brings out like a competitive aspect in the group, but also a kind of camaraderie that I think might not have been built, with just their classmates that they see day in, day out. They really kind of like bring each other up.
I see. What are the main problems that you have with that crew?
I would have to say for sure it's wake up. So some days these field trips we might have wake up as early as 5:30 a.m. and this is in summertime when they're all used to sleeping in, and so issues of not being downstairs on time is probably the most common one.
Well,
but as far as like maybe behavioral, no, never. They're always really well behaved.
Oh, really? So there are no problems about the relationships between them or among the teachers or professors?
No. Usually, in any issue that arises, we can smooth out pretty easy. It's a good going, easy going field trip for the most part.
That's great. What about Thomas? Do you think the same?
Yes, I'd say the same, and some of these people that I went on GeoForce trips with, I still keep in contact with today. Even from the Southwest group, I have good friends in my as colleagues here in college that I hang out with and have a good time with, that I actually attend field camp with. So it's a really wonderful experience.
And Daniel told us that he was part of the third crop, the 2007 year of GeoForce. What about you, Thomas?
So I applied for GeoForce in 2012. So 2012 through 2016 is when I was in the program.
Okay. So, and how does it work during these 4 years? How many times do you see people from GeoForce?
Yep. So there's 4 trips, and each trip is roughly about a week long. The senior trip is 10 days long, or 9 days. So yeah, for roughly a week every year, you're on these trips. So I do have to go back and relearn their names sometimes, but for the most part, I remember everyone. Yeah.
And do you prepare the field trip? Do you have to study some material before going there?
Not necessarily. So usually with especially the first 3 field trips, there's a field guidebook. So you're encouraged every night whenever you take your quizzes, you're also encouraged to study your field guidebook for the next day, so that when you visit the outcrops, you're actually educated a little bit as far as the surface geology that you're going to be seeing. So there is some studying on the trip that needs to be done for sure.
So Thomas, were those 4 trips the very first time that you were exposed to geology in a professional way?
I'd say so. These are college level concepts. We're talking, law of original horizontality kind of stuff, all the basics that we're getting down, and we're actually seeing in real time.
So tell me, be sincere. So how did you feel when you learn about the very first geological concepts, like, I don't know, tectonics maybe, or stratigraphy, or sedimentology?
I'd say it's a lot easier to grasp when you're actually there in the field. So, maybe some of this stuff might have seemed like witchcraft, right, in schools. But when you're actually there and you're seeing it, it's hard to deny it because you're seeing it right there in front of your face. So I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And especially that camaraderie that was talked about by Daniel.
Yes.
I really felt it, that competitive nature, and I loved it.
Daniel, tell us about your story. How was your reaction when you saw for the very first time the rocks and somebody was explaining you how they formed?
So I feel like maybe a more eye-opening exposure for me was this location in Pennsylvania, Sideling Hill, which is like an enormous, maybe it's a syncline, and it's on the scale of like several, maybe 400 meters across, something like that. And it was kind of eye-opening for, geologists to say, hey, this was originally laid down horizontally, and then it was folded, and then, by virtue of building a road here, they cut through it and exposed all the layers. And it was a concept that maybe I didn't get right away, but going to these types of outcrops where it's just very clear was eye-opening, and it was cool to see.
For me, I don't know you, Dana, but for me it was so difficult. The very first times going out to see the mountains, and I probably the very first times was in the Alps in Italy, where I'm from. Wow. I couldn't really understand anything. What is this man talking about?
I had probably the opposite experience where I just saw things in textbooks for a long time, and our field trips. One of my first geology field trips was from Baton Rouge to the Houston Museum of Natural History to look at the gems and minerals. We have great active sedimentation in Louisiana, but I didn't really get to see, structural geology like you see in textbooks until later in college and then in grad school. I remember the first time I saw boudinage. I was really, really excited.
Yes, I can believe it. What about the teachers that they teach to these 84 students? Are they volunteers? Are they professionals? How do you collaborate with the teachers or instructors?
We have a great mix of instructors, I would say. So we have a long time investment from the Jackson School, both financially and then from our personal resources here. So we have instructors who are on the faculty of the Department of Geological Sciences. We also have a number of instructors who are researchers within the Bureau of Economic Geology, and they get paid, but that's not the reason they're doing it. It's not a lot of money. It's just to compensate them for their time and their effort. And we have some instructors who have been doing it for more than 10 years, and they love going out into the field with the students. We also have a number of other staff on the educational teams who make things happen, including a role we call an educational coach. And these have traditionally been high school teachers, high school science teachers, maybe middle school science teachers, from a lot of times from the schools where GeoForce students attend. And those ECs, we call them, are really more adept at kind of translating the science to the appropriate level for high schoolers. And recently we've been engaging more with graduate students of the Jackson School as well. And a lot of the graduate students here in the Jackson School and at other universities are concerned and committed to issues of diversity and inclusion in geosciences, and also just about education and outreach of the geosciences, and so they really enjoy coming out with us and teaching the students the science that they love and work on every day.
That's interesting because through the program you have also byproducts like this learning of the teachers on how to reach out, which is something that we would like to do, but sometimes we geologists, we have never been taught on how to do it. So that is a very useful, I would call it byproduct, learning how to do it. Do you use this also through other means? Do you, now that you have a group of teachers that they learn how to reach out, how to communicate better, how to translate the scientific geological language into something more popular, do you use it for other purposes?
Yeah, there is really kind of an army of GeoForce-related educators out there. On one hand, one kind of segment of people who come to mind are secondary school teachers, maybe science teachers who have been on a trip with GeoForce, and then they just got the geology bug and sought out more professional development opportunities, such as Texas A&M runs a field camp for high school educators. Or one teacher that usually works with us during the summer, she couldn't this past summer because she was going to be a teacher in residence for a geoscience expedition to the Arctic. So we lost her for the summer, but for good reason. And then we do like to think that the experience for the graduate students is beneficial for them moving forward in their careers, whether that's going to be, like you say, communicating with the public, whether it will be becoming a professor and training future geoscientists. And we even work with undergraduates who are preparing to be teachers. So we have some GeoForce students, for example, who are education majors, but they come and teach with us on these GeoForce trips, and we hope that they will eventually bring that back into their classrooms, whether it's in a math class for fourth graders or a chemistry class for a ninth or 10th grader.
And Dana, this 84 students per year, where do they end up?
Ooh, yeah. So that kind of goes into some of the things I work on work on specifically. Thomas mentioned that we have you have your 4 field experiences, and the GeoForce support doesn't end there. So we recently started up what we call the Math and Science Institute for GeoForce students, which is the summer before their freshman year of college. You have to apply separately to it, but we've run it for 2 years now, and Daniel has run it along with me. And it's sort of a boot camp style preparation to sort of get students into the college learning zone and to give them a boost as much as we can for their upcoming math and chemistry courses. So when our GeoForce students, almost half of them end up going into STEM majors, which that's compared to, if you look at the national numbers, it's about a third of students across the country end up earning degrees in STEM fields. So we outperform the national average in that. Somewhere around 10% of our students end up earning geoscience degrees, which might not sound like a lot, but when you compare it to the national number of less than 0.5%, we are way above the national average. So we're proud of that. So, and we now have more and more students entering the workforce. We have a number of students who are entering the workforce in Houston. Students are in graduate school, and then students who don't become geoscientists are earning medical degrees and physical therapy, doctorates in physical therapy, law degrees. We try to keep in touch and support GeoForce students really no matter what major they end up going into.
Interesting. And 10% they remain into the geological world, let's say. Those 10% are some of them already working, maybe the very first ones of 2005. Are they working, and where are they working?
Yeah, they are working. So they're working at, one student is working at Exxon, recent hire at Exxon. Another is a recent hire at Shell. I talk with students who are working in environmental consulting as well. And then maybe even sometimes, they're a geologist who got hired on to a construction company, because you can kind of find these unusual jobs that you wouldn't think about that a geologist would look for. But yeah, they're out there, and we hope they're kind of spreading the good word of geoscience and of GeoForce.
I bet. It is something extraordinary to pick up a student in an inner city or in a rural area and then going to work for one of the largest corporations, or even if it is not a large corporation but goes to work in a high-profile professional job. Mm-hmm. And so when you and the teachers, when you teach the geology, the geoscience, do you have in mind which kind of geology do you want to teach? They could teach the oil and gas geology, so petroleum systems, or more about the renewable energy coming up with a switch,
right.
Or maybe environmental geology, or as you said, construction geology in order to do construction.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. It's something we are thinking about a lot these days. Not everyone wants to go into certain fields, and not everybody gets excited by rocks. Some people might find a mountain beautiful, but don't think there's any reason to study it. So we have been taking a look at our curriculum and trying to be more deliberate in exposing students to the wide variety of the geosciences. And I guess the example I'll give you is with our 12th grade academy that Daniel has run a couple of those, and Thomas was a staff member on one of them this last summer. But we switch it up a lot for the students on that one. So they are tasked in their student groups on this 12th grade academy with what we call a challenge. So it's basically a hypothetical scenario that a professional geoscientist might be put into. So this summer there were 3 possible challenges that student groups might have to address. One was a little more traditional in I suppose, the content that was getting covered. It was kind of more of an Earth history story, but the motivation is, all right, you've been hired by Texas State Parks and Wildlife Department to try and attract more visitors between the ages of 18 to 30, so basically millennials. And the way that your company has decided they're going to do that is to create a series of Snapchat filters. So these are overlays that are geographically tagged, and so you can hold up your phone and see the story of how Enchanted Rock formed, which is one of the sites we go to near Austin. So the students are kind of getting to use their creativity and their science communication to address that one. One of the other challenges is related to water resources. We, being in Central Texas, are constantly either we don't get enough rain or we're getting too much rain. And so water resources are a big issue here. And the third challenge that we have the students address is related more to geotechnical engineering or engineering geology, and thinking about kind of potential hazards of a landscape and how to study those from a geoscience perspective and then bring them to the engineers who can make the decisions on how to mitigate risks.
Most of the program is about outcrops and going out in the field trips. What else do you do? Is exclusively the outcrops or something else beyond the things that you have been explaining already?
We on our 12th grade academy, something neat that we've started incorporating, because we stay here at UT Austin, we visit a couple of Jackson School labs. So this past summer, we took the students to the vertebrate paleontology laboratory, which is just an incredible collection of vertebrate specimens from all over Texas and the U.S. and the world, really, that is kept up at the Pickle Research Campus here in Austin. And a lot of students, we scientists who work there, take them through the space and show them how they kind of take care of the specimens and study them and what you can learn from it. And we've definitely had students leave that tour, which is inside, but they've left that tour and said, I want to be a paleontologist now.
Yeah, exactly. What is the reaction?
It varies by student. You know, when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have thought it was so cool, but it's an amazing place. Most of them are pretty wowed by that one. Another lab that we have visited the last 2 summers is the morphodynamics lab, where there are huge tanks of water where scientists are basically pouring sand and sediment into it and seeing how sediment interacts with currents in the water to understand things like landslides or energy deposits sedimentary deposits on the ocean floor that might host energy resources.
So Dana, all of this has a cost in dollars. Who is investing into this spectacular program of GeoForce?
Well, the Jackson School pays my salary. So the Jackson School is a big contributor, but we are thankful to have donations from oil and gas companies in Houston, as well as a number of foundations. We also rely on individual donations. So right now, we actually have a fundraiser going on online through the UT crowdsourced platform called Fundraiser, and I would be happy to plug the URL if I may.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
It's https://Hornraiser, that's all one word, HORNRAISER.utexas.edu/GeoForce. And if you can't remember that, you can just Google Hornraiser, and then our project comes up on the page, or you can Google Hornraiser GeoForce. So we do really appreciate individual donations that come through the undergraduates and graduate students here at the Jackson School, and the faculty and staff really support us as well. And so they're annual fundraisers like raffles and picnics that help us put on the programming that we really know can make a difference.
Yeah, we're talking about very important fundraisers, because I read in your website that GeoForce has an annual budget of about 1.8 million, of which about 1 million is raised annually from gifts and grants. That is what you are mentioning now. I was wondering, since I see the sponsors, they are mainly, or the main sponsors, they are oil and gas corporations, if they have a say, or if they drive or bring their ideas on how to teach the geology that we were talking about. So at some point you have to decide among the many topics and methods to explain geology, how to do it. So I was wondering if maybe the sponsors, they play a role in here.
Right. Well, we really encourage the participation of our sponsors. So something that I think is really unique to the program is that on pretty much every GeoForce trip that goes out, there's at least one professional geoscientist on the trip, and they are representatives from these different companies. So there may be an exploration geologist from BHP on the 11th grade trip to Oregon. Our sponsors do respect our independence, I would say. We ask them for feedback for sure on kind of content, and especially when it comes to, hey, what are y'all working on now? Like what are the skills that you're looking for in future geoscientists? But they really like to come on the trips and hear from the students themselves, and I'd say observe for themselves what gets students interested, and they know that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of science or kind of mission.
And Dana, what is your feeling about what these oil companies are looking for? Which kind of students they would like to have, since I think that the sponsorship is also to create the workforce that they will use in the near future.
Yeah, it is. The geosciences as a whole we are going through a lot of change right now in terms of what the future of our field looks like. There are new and exciting opportunities, I would say, in data science and analytics. Thomas here actually is he's getting a lot of experience with GIS, so there's kind of spatial imaging career options out there now, but they want high quantitative skills in addition to content expertise. Communication is always really high up there in terms of, can you write and speak well? So our students, on that 12th grade academy that I was mentioning, we actually push them right away, and they have to give a 12-minute presentation with their group on the project that they did. So we try to incorporate things like public speaking skills and scientific communication into it, because we do see that is still remains a valued skill of it.
Dana, Daniel and Thomas, think about your dreams and nightmares, which I'm going to ask you about in a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. But Dana, I want to ask your opinion, because I'm concerned about the oil companies maybe not caring that much nowadays about the geologists, that they have robust and strong understanding of the field, of the outcrops. Is that my impression, or you have so many interactions with them in public relationships, you also feel the same?
That's a good question. I mean, my colleagues who I interact with from the oil and gas companies, they love going out to the outcrops themselves. And I think, at least here at the Jackson School, we do still prioritize hands-on field experience. Now, within companies, I think there are certainly teams that the expertise that they need on those teams maybe doesn't necessarily require a lot of field experience. But, I think I'm kind of with you on, you can look at maybe images of the subsurface, but it's hard to get a sense of scale or the resolution that you can imagine in your mind without having seen a above the surface exposure of that, like a correlating kind of exposure of that. But our sponsors who I get to interact with, I mean, they're coming with us on these field trips, and so I think they still are excited about the fact that students are getting outside.
Thanks, Dana. I hope to talk more with you about this and trying to learn where we're going on this, because I think that the basics of learning the 3 dimensions when you are by yourself in the field is something fundamental. But allow me to close with Daniel and Thomas. I would like to listen what are your dreams and your nightmares nowadays.
So I have to say that probably talking about dreams is easier. So I am just starting my PhD program in my first semester, and research is something that I'm comfortable doing. And so, a dream career might be at like an R1 research institution or like at a national lab. I could see myself maybe going to like Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, a place that I might be more comfortable having visited that region with GeoForce in the past.
Nightmares?
Nightmares? I don't know. Maybe sleeping through a qualifying exam or something like that.
Okay, what about Thomas?
Yes. I'd say as far as dreams go, I'd say one thing that's kind of on the horizon that I've been thinking about recently is maybe being a humanitarian geologist and going to maybe a different country or a different place with the goal of helping out that community and using my geoscience knowledge to, maybe find water resources or help a community in need. So I think that's something I'm looking at in the future, and I'm starting to take classes on hydrogeology and things like that right now. So as far as a dream, I think that's something that I'd like to pursue.
All right. So thanks, Daniel and Thomas. Thank you, Dana Thomas. Thank you all, you from GeoForce at the Jackson School of Geoscience in the UT Austin. Remember, listeners, that GeoForce is in fundraising right now. Dana, do you want to tell the listeners what to Google to find the fundraising website?
Yes, thank you. You can Google horn raiser, like longhorn, horn raiser, GeoForce, and it should pop right up.
All right, and so you will help 84 8th grade students per year. And this is a very important program, GeoForce, that exists since 2005. Well, thank you again, everybody. It has been great to be here with you. This was a mini geology, your weekly program at KPFT HD2 channel. And thank you again, Dana, Daniel, and Thomas.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
Good.